texture of Yaba is something I must discover. Does anyone remember the Rogue One promotional panel where they had I think it was like a Google auto correct or like autofill interview or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like a Wired video, but it's just Diego Luna being like, I want to touch Yaba. The texture of Yaba is something I must discover. I love it.
Oh man, this episode, Mac. Don't forget the Pizzos, Keith. You got to get me those greeny greens. Got to get me those greeny green Revnog, Keith.
You know.
Listen, I don't think that the Empire was wrong to question Keith Gergo, because with a name like Keith Gergo,
no, like
it's not his best alias.
It's not his best alias. I think he probably got put on the spot, if I had to mention, or he was a few greeny greens in when he had to come up with the name. That's another explanation.
Too much Revnog.
It's really fun that Star Wars has Atlantic City. That's also Panama City Beach.
I was about to say Miami. I don't know if it's like a Miami type thing going on there, but it's definitely fun. This episode has so much to it. But I did want to mention up top that, we said this last week. The Star Wars Celebration schedule has come out, and I feel like we would be foolish not to mention that the very first panel on Friday, April 18th, is going to be the Mandalorian and Grogu panel. Now, what does that mean? That means we are going to be getting a ton of information about what that movie is going to be in 1 year's time when that comes out in May 2026. Mac, I even think we're probably going to get like a teaser trailer, I would say, or a behind the scenes type look. I don't know. We're gonna see some footage from the movie. I don't know if that's going to be released to us, but basically
we'll watch it on a grainy cell phone video from
100%. But I think we will be getting it like April 17th at night, if my math is right. So if the panel is like, let's say 10 or 11 in Japan on Friday morning, that means it's like 8 or 9 here Thursday night. Is that right?
I should know this better, seeing as I was just doing all of these calculations every day at the end of last year. But yeah, that sounds about right. It's like a 13-hour difference, I think. So,
So that Thursday night, April 17th, is going to be fun. So if you think we're not going to cover that, even though Andor Season 2 is about to come up, you don't know who we are. We're going to definitely cover and talk about especially the Mandalorian and Grogu panel. And then there's going to be an Ahsoka panel, which I assume we're going to be getting some information on Season 2. I don't think we'll get quite as much information about that as we will the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. There's going to be an Andor panel, which I assume everyone there is going to get to see either the first episode or first 3 episodes. And then on Sunday, they're doing like a Star Wars Visions Volume 3 thing.
Yeah. I mean, that should be a great, celebration in Japan would be a great place to see the new Vision stuff. So, but
it's
celebrations right around the corner. Lots to look forward to. I can't wait to see. I will get some new visuals from Mando and Grogu for sure. I mean, like if they had enough to give us a trailer all that time ago already, I think we'll be getting at least a few more nuggets.
I think we'll get some story context for it, like in terms of like what is actually going on. Is the Road to the Hutt rumors true? Is the Embo rumors true?
Yeah.
I think we'll have a better sense of all of that, and of course we'll break it all down on the podcast the weekend before Andor Season 2 comes out. It's gonna feel like May the 4th already, like before it actually happens. So that's I don't know. It's gonna be such a good like momentum boost into Andor Season 2, and I just wanted to mention that. And then there was a ton of news last week about Kathleen Kennedy, Simon Kinberg, the Sean Levy movie. We're going to save that conversation towards the end of this episode because we're here to talk about Keith Gergo.
Keith Gergo. You are listening to Children of the Watch. I'm Mac Lacey.
And I'm Keith Gergo. And today we are breaking down the 7th episode of Andor for our Rix Road to Season 2 of Andor. If you're new to our podcast, we break down every single episode of Star Wars television, scene by scene, to analyze the story, find comb for Easter eggs, and explain how it all connects to the larger Star Wars universe. And, if you're wondering, like, wow, they didn't talk about that major news thing that happened, is because we're actually recording this a week early.
It's because we're from a long time ago in a galaxy very, very close to here.
I'm in Disney World by the time you're listening to this, and there's a good chance that you are going to want to follow us on our socials because I actually might go live at Galaxy's Edge via our TikTok or Instagram. So make sure you're following us at COT Watch because I've never ridden the rides of the Resistance ride. I got to ride Smuggler's Run, but Rise of the Resistance wasn't open when I went. I'm right, man.
So I was in the same boat that you were at last time I went. I had ridden Smuggler's Run, like right when it opened, but then I hadn't been since Rise of the Resistance was out. You're gonna have such a great time, Alex. You're gonna freak out. I'm like, call me right after. Let me know what you think.
Yeah. So my family, I'm taking my family down there, and we're gonna have a good time, I think. But it's kind of the reason we're going is because it's like our last little chance to be our little family unit before we add a little one.
Ooh,
in September.
Another little Padawan.
Yeah, it's gonna be a boy. We're very, very excited about that, and we're gonna be naming him Keith Gergo.
Yeah. Like, what else would you name him? We all know he's really named Toro Calican. Toro Calican Maxwell.
Actually, that's not a bad idea. Now that you say it. I kind of love that. So we're super excited about that. We're going to be down at Disney World. Make sure you're following us over on socials. I might do some live streams while I'm in the park. I just think that would be fun to do if I'm able to do it. So check it out. I'm definitely going to be taking pictures and videos and stuff too that I'll put up on our pages and stuff. But we also have our Patreon, patreon.com/The Mandalorian Watch. For just $2 a month, you can get access to our Discord and over 100 bonus episodes. And then when Andor is in season, we're going to be doing our voicemail hotline episodes as well, which you'll have access to via our Patreon. So definitely check that out if you are able to. But all that to say, Mac, I think we're ready to talk about episode 7, Announcement. I just gave an announcement.
Announcements.
Announcements.
A terrible way to die. A terrible way to die. A terrible way, a terrible way, a terrible way to die. From announcements.
What is that from?
Boy Scouts. That's what I know.
I was thinking a movie.
Anytime anybody said the word announcements, everybody would sing the song to cut them off and prevent them from saying the announcement. So everybody said enrichment if they had an announcement to make. I have an enrichment, and then you couldn't do the song.
Oh yeah, because enrichment
doesn't work as well. Yeah.
So this is episode 7, Announcement. Director Benjamin Caron, writer Stephen Schiff. And this is kind of what we talked about last week. There was a pattern that was developing in Andor, but this kind of breaks the mold a little bit of what Andor is going to be in season 2 and what it's been so far, where this is more of a transitional episode, kind of gets us out of the first part of Andor and gets us into the second half of Andor. And there's a ton of things that happen in this episode, Mac.
Yeah, it's a huge transitional episode, definitely kind of shaking up the rhythm that the season has had before. It's also one in which, honestly, Cassian takes a massive back seat.
Yeah, he does.
And it kind of signals Cassian taking a back seat for the next couple, because he's not as prominent of a figure in the arc that's coming than he is in the rest of his own show, you know? I definitely think we're entering into a part of the show that's much more about the overall ideas and that are kind of on the battleground rather than like Cassian's personal fights, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I also say that like Mon Mothma becomes much more of a central character from here on out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot more focus on her. She's like this. She's also taking a personal kind of leap of her own, you know, in starting her foundation and everything. We talked about all that in episode 5. We kind of got word that, you know, she was bringing somebody else in, maybe that, or maybe that's in this episode. It all runs together a little bit.
I think we got word of it, and then they mention it in the recap too. Because I kind of forgot that too. Is like that's why she went to go talk to Luthen originally. It was like, hey, I need to bring somebody else in on this because I think everybody's watching me.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, so let's jump into this. This episode begins after the recap and our Andor title sequence with Cyril Karn sitting upright in his bedroom, staring out the window. Once again, we saw this in episode 5 of Andor, where he was just kind of like checked out, and it seems like the world is closing in on Cyril Karn as he has no purpose in life and is hounded constantly by his nagging mother, who calls for him to break him out of his reverie. And he stands up to go, and as he stands up, he sighs. And he goes to have breakfast with his mother, and she just immediately just starts in on him of like, what are you wearing? Yeah. Like, why are you wearing that? Why is it that color? Those sort of things, as he's trying to just eat a cereal and get through the morning with his mother. And again, it's just, I think, another reminder of where Cyril is coming from in terms of the expectations laid on him and the expectations he has for himself are probably are what driving him either to do terrible things in season 2 or join the rebellion. Nobody knows what's going to happen with him.
It's like, we hope it's the second. I've got my personal ideas of where that goes. It's probably not to the rebellion, but
I have a sense, Mac. This is kind of because last week we had the special look on Disney Plus of Andor season 2, and if you pause it with Deidre, she is actually in Cyril's home, and his mom is in the background. I almost wonder if Deidre is going to manipulate Cyril by like kind of almost faking a relationship, like having maybe there's something there, but she's kind of manipulating him to do something, and he'll end up doing it for her because like he's obsessed with her. I think that might be where it's going.
And that's certainly what the end of this season would allow us to believe in terms of where he's at with regards to Dedra. It's wild. But I mean, he's one of the biggest question marks in terms of where, I'm wondering where he goes in season 2.
I don't know. I think he's on Gorman, where the Gorman massacre is going to happen. I just don't know how he ties into the overall plot at all. I think, since the first 3 episodes, he's just kind of out there. He's doing whatever Uncle Harlow has said to do, and that's what Cyril's mom is bringing up in this conversation is like, hey, Uncle Harlow has done so much for you. You should be very grateful for everything that he's doing for you, and he's just eating his cereal, trying to get through the morning, and I think he doesn't feel like he has a fulfilling life. I don't think he feels like he has any purpose in life, and I think he's kind of drowning. And I think when he's in that interview later in this episode, he brings up what happened on Pre-Morlana again to someone who absolutely doesn't even care what he's talking about. I think it's just another clear indication of like he cannot move on from that incident that happened with Cassian and him killing 2 of those corporate guards. But after they kind of have this conversation, the 2 of them, they're interrupted by the television set in their home, which I guess is like the holo set. And a news person goes on to talk about the incident that happened on Aldhani. And I thought this was super interesting, Mac, because we never really, like I think in the EU, I think in whenever we've read books and stuff, we've heard of HoloNet news, those sort of things, but we've never actually seen it. So it's kind of interesting to see the news in Star Wars.
Yeah, like even just like what it looks like, what the interface, like how it's delivered and stuff. It's interesting, but I mean, like we all know. What it's interesting they put Cyril here because he's like lost all purpose in his life, and then they put this event happening where it's something so full of purpose and like has changed things on a permanent level and everything that Cyril has to react to, and it's he like I think he's just seeing how much you see how much he would rather be doing anything that mattered, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I almost feel like he feels left out.
Yeah.
Like he's like, what happened? What's going on? And it's interesting too that the HoloNet news reporter is basically saying, hey, this was a terrorist attack, right? Like it's kind of grown from the end of episode 6 where it's like this was a robbery.
Right.
They called it a rebel attack. Now they're calling it a terrorist attack. And it seems like it's kind of growing the more that they learn about this incident. And it's going to set off something as we see in the next scene at the ISB. And we get a major character from Star Wars. I mean, he's literally in A New Hope. He's one of the council members with Tarkin and Darth Vader on the Death Star. We get Admiral Yularen.
Yeah, big deal.
This is so cool, Mac.
Yeah, just the connections to even like the original trilogy and everything. It's and then also to like the Clone Wars and Rebels. Like we see him through that. So. It's cool to see him show up here, and I'd love to see more of him in the future, but we'll see.
It's cool because again, if you've watched the Clone Wars, he's a major character in the Clone Wars. He's a good guy in the Clone Wars. He's always working side by side with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. He seems like the level-headed one of the group a lot of the times and making decisions and stuff. And here he is now working for the Empire. He's an admiral for the Empire, and he is not happy. And you see all of the ISB agents within the meeting room. You actually kind of see Deidre get ready and stuff as we hear Yularen talking. But within the conference room itself, we actually see Yularen explaining, okay, I talked with Palpatine himself last night, and here's what we're going to do. So, like, this is a guy who has a direct line to Palpatine, right?
Yeah.
And so that escalates everything. What they did on Aldhani has made Palpatine aware, and he is getting involved with what's going on. And Yularen is talking about all of these freedoms that they're now going to be taking away from the citizens of the Empire, not just Aldhani. Yeah, they mention Aldhani, but everybody's going to pay for what happened on Aldhani. And it escalates things.
Yeah. Yeah, things are serious. It is like it has caught the attention of absolutely every eye in the Empire. And that's both an amazing thing because it's showing people that other people are sticking up to the Empire, that there's other people out there who feel the same way you do and you can be like us and do something about it and everything like that. It's also a really dangerous thing because now they're facing, levels of like suspicion, scrutiny, that the rebellion hasn't had to deal with before because they didn't know it existed.
Right.
So yeah, it's really cool. This event changes everything. I love the connection of all these big events to where we have, this is like the real kind of start of the rebellion. We have, the events of Rogue One is also kind of being the start of the rebellion in a different way.
Victory,
and then you've got, the Battle of Yavin, which solidifies the rebellion as more of an actual military political power than just like an insurgency. So yeah, I love tracing these little events that just make up the chain of dominoes that ends up toppling the Empire.
And not only is it a chain of dominoes that end up toppling the Empire, what we see at the beginning of this episode with Yularen talking, it's a domino that Andor himself started and then will affect him at the end of the episode, because one of the things that they're instituting because of what happened on Aldhani is Yularen mentions that they're going to be invoking the Public Order Resentencing Directive later today, which we all know it as PORD. I mean, everyone.
Of course. I mean, we all remember when that was getting passed, and you know, it was in the news. Like PORD, it's right up there with like the Patriot Act. Like
this is PORD. Yeah. And so basically, they're going to make sentences harsher. That's essentially kind of what it is, and we end up seeing like Cassian getting that, like the karma of that affecting him with what happens on Naomos towards the end of the episode. Like what would be 6 months becomes 6 years, and then he gets shipped off to the prison, which is the best arc in all of Andor.
Of course.
So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Like, in a weird roundabout way, what he did on Aldhani is what made him go to jail. Yeah. But they don't even like know that he's the one that caused it.
Right. It's fun.
It's dramatic irony, I guess. Is that what that is?
Yeah. I mean, we know something that the characters don't, so I think that's dramatic irony.
Yeah, I think so. Then we cut to kind of the repercussions. Okay, so we see the repercussions on the Imperial side. What are they like for the Rebellion side? So we cut to Luthen Rael in his galactic antiquity shop as he's listening to a man on the radio. Almost kind of sounds like a droid to me, kind of relaying the information of what has happened on Aldhani and how 134 Donnies have been taken into custody. Good thing, like, there's no good things happening to the Donnie people because of this. Like, they're going to feel the brunt of what happened as the punishment kind of rains down on them, probably the hardest.
And you kind of see Luthen's indifference to that.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of a terrible reality of being at the level of decision making he is, you know? He's... And then it he's not asking these questions of himself, but it makes us ask the questions of like, how different is Luthen from the Empire if like he's not worried about the wake of destruction from like the rebels' operations and stuff like that. It's just an interesting thing. It's a dissonance that, I'm sure Luthen is having to deal with in his head of being completely sure of himself, being completely glad that the operation went the way it did, and then also having to deal with the fallout. I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting perspective.
Also, I mean, it's just, I like it because no one's perfect, right? Like, this isn't like in Star Wars, like just the original Star Wars and the movies specifically, it's space opera. Yeah. So there's a grander, more mythological feel to everything. Where this is the nitty gritty, where it's like, no, there are people behind the people, like we see Han, Luke, and Leia, who have to make the really tough choices and live with it, or to live with it, they've got to kind of shut off their emotions to certain things that probably would have bothered them before. But if you want to wage a war, I don't know if you can care about those sort of things all that much until it's all said and done. And I think we even get that indication later in the series when Luthen gives his incredible monologue about how he uses the tools of his enemies because, like he's the only one who can, right? Like he will sacrifice himself so that others don't have to.
It's the Batman of it all. Like
yes.
He can be what people need him to be and everything. I have a hard time if I'm wrestling with that for myself. Like I don't think all of the decisions are made in the best way and stuff. If we're being just, I do think the 134, Donnies, like their lives matter just as much as the ones you're saving with the credits you're getting from the robbery and everything.
Yep.
So I think that tells me I'm not a person to be in this kind of position,
You're a Nimic. You're a Nimic.
It's I don't know. It's just something that, and I think a lot of times the difference between being the Empire and being Luthen is examining what you're doing and understanding the consequences and still having to go forward anyway, because the Empire just doesn't care.
Right.
It's interesting.
There seems to be different levels, right? Saw Gerrera is on the most extreme side, almost villainous,
right? The
way that he operates. Then Luthen would be, I think, under him, not quite villainous, but kind of cold.
Yeah.
Under him,
it's like the Ghost Crew.
I was gonna say Leia, someone like Leia, kind of under him of got to make hard choices, but man struggles with it. Right. And then almost under her, I feel like Mon Mothma, at least at this point, I would say Mon Mothma and Leia are probably on the same level by the time of the original trilogy. But at this point, with what we're seeing, because in this scene that's about to happen, Mon Mothma is what are you doing? You can't do stuff like this. So Luthen gets a surprise visit by Mon Mothma to the shop, and she's pretending like she's bringing back the gift that she bought earlier because Perrin liked it, but he didn't love it. And she goes in, but really to ask him, was that you? And at first, Luthen is playing hard to get. He's kind of no, it wasn't me, but it was really interesting, wasn't it? And she's like, stop playing games with me. I know it was you. And then they kind of have this little philosophical debate that goes on here. And I thought that was just kind of another interesting layer of what are the actual dynamics of this rebellion at this point? Who is calling the shots? Right now it's Luthen. And it almost seemed like it might have used to be almost like a council type thing of let's all agree before we start on something. And it seems like Luthen just went ahead with this plan on his own because he's ready to get things started.
It may have been that nobody else that he's consulting with, had the actual gumption to take action, and he was like, "Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. If we do this and pull it off, action's happening one way or another. There's no more waiting, stalling. We get it's do or die now."
Yeah, and I think, too, Luthen acted because he brings up to Mon Mothma as he's, pretending to get another thing for her. You mentioned bringing someone else into this, so I wanted to do this before you did that because as soon as you start to bring more people in, that means more opinions, right? Yep. And so it's I kind of forced my hand a little bit.
Right. Because you get the sense that maybe Luthen has counseled against bringing anybody in to Mon Mothma, but yeah,
and it's just I don't know. He goes on to say we've waited long enough. It's time to do this. I know what this means. You know what this means, and I think there's part of Mon Mothma who's kind of I don't know if I'm ready to start this.
Yeah.
So.
But it's too late for that now. It's started.
It is started.
And I think that's what Luthen wanted, is just the path of no return. He wanted the line of demarcation. Things are going whether you like it or not.
And part of the reason he wanted it to start is because he knew how Palpatine would react to it. Right?
Yeah.
There would be escalation. He knew all the things that they were going to do. And that's kind of part of the reason why he did it.
Yeah, he wants the escalation, the accelerationism, because he feels like they're not going to be able to rally support without a more drastic, affront to people, I guess, being portrayed. Because like right now, the Empire is strangling everybody so slowly, he says, that we don't even notice.
Yep.
Like we've stopped noticing. Line. But he knows that if the boot comes down, everybody's forced with a choice. So,
and again, that's such a hard choice to make. Of like, that things are going to get worse in the short term, but it might be better for you in the long term to go ahead and get this done. And let's just do it.
And like, I think it's worth. Like, you can argue whether or not Luthen's right or wrong, and I think both. There's arguments on both sides that like. He is doing the right thing. He's not doing the right thing. But that's what we love about this show, is that it's not cut and dry.
Right. And so Mon Mothma leaves kind of in anger. The front's still on, but in terms of like, there is disconnect between the rebellion leaders of like how this should have been handled and what they do next. And then we cut to Cyril Karn at his new desk job. And he's getting interviewed while he's at this place, and this is the scene where he brings up what happened, and that guy just stands there and listens to it, and it's like, okay, that's great, but you've got to check in every day from 8 to 5 or whatever, just completely. I feel like he's disconnected from whatever this is, right? Like he is still stuck in pre-Morlana corporate sector.
Yeah, he doesn't realize that, like, no, he's not still on the path to whatever grand destiny he thought awaited him. He's being put into an office on the shelf.
Right. And then we cut to Kleya walking through kind of the busy upper echelon Coruscant society. It kind of seems like a spaceport a little bit, like this is the airport. And she's walking through. And one of the things, I don't know if you noticed, but as she's walking through, there's a lot more stormtroopers present. That's the conversation that we had last week, is like, from here on out, you're going to start to see more and more stormtroopers when they weren't as present before, because now the Emperor Palpatine himself is kind of directing things and having a little more power, because he's taken away power from the citizens. And that means his hand is now at work.
I mean, it's like, the Empire has always had a firm grasp. It's not like they've ever let anybody retain any power that they couldn't prevent. But before, they had the illusion of the like stormtroopers and everybody. This is a military apparatus. It's separate. You're not going to come into contact with it. It's the corporate sectors and everything that are actually running things day to day. And through the course of the season, you see the Imperial military become more of like the police force of these places, and it's more of a military occupation of the galaxy instead of any kind of republic rule.
And I think Luthen got his wish, right? Like, because I think what you were saying before, it's like the corporate sector, that's the slow choking of everything that you don't really notice, because like these guys have always been there. They're just working for the Empire. Now it's directly in your face. Right.
Yeah.
So he got his wish. But then we get a quick scene with Dedra as she asks for everything in terms of kind of the clues that she's looking for, and she's making a power play that is not going to sit right with Blevin and the rest of the ISB, and we'll see the whole politics of the ISB play out later in the episode, but that's just kind of a little setup for it there. And then we cut back to Aldhani with Cinta as she uncovers some of like her equipment to escape Aldhani and kind of get rid of everything, get rid of the evidence of what happened on Aldhani. But as she is doing that and preparing to leave Aldhani, she looks up to see an Imperial Star Destroyer entering the atmosphere. And again, just another indicator of things are escalating.
Yep. Like Star Destroyers were things that were out in space for military purposes until now. Now they're orbiting planets as this symbol of occupation of Imperial control. Before they were just using the TIE fighters soaring overhead and stuff. Now they've got the full Star Destroyer overhead.
Right. And then we cut to a scene where we see Kleya emerging into kind of this empty area in Coruscant, kind of, again, towards the top of Coruscant, not, level 13 right. Down in the depths. This is where the rich people live on Coruscant. So I think you're probably going to expect, people to act like they're rich and not like they're rebellion leaders and stuff like that, which kind of makes it the perfect hiding spot for the rebellion. And she meets with a dressed up Vel, right?
Yeah.
There's Vel, and she's also looking like she belongs here. And she does not look like she did on Aldhani. Like this is, again, her Bruce Wayne attire. If we're doing the Batman thing,
just like Luthen has his like Willy Wonka suit that he wears, it's the same thing.
It is a Willy Wonka suit.
There's something so Willy Wonka about Luthen to me, and I don't know what it is. Like it goes beyond just the purple overcoat or whatever. There's something there. I'll have to explore that. Right now on air out loud is not the time to do that. But I will think about that. I don't know. I don't know if it's like because Willy Wonka is putting on a double, like he's putting on a front the whole movie. I'm talking Gene Wilder, by the way.
Yeah.
But like I don't know if it's the double nature of him, where he's presenting as this wondrous eccentric factory owner, and he's actually this like pretty troubled man worried about his legacy and like succession and stuff like that. I don't know what if it's that about it. But there's something that just reminds me of Willy Wonka when I look at Luthen in disguise.
I feel like there should be an essay on this. Okay, so they're meeting, Vel and Kleya, and it seems like Vel is answering to Kleya, and Vel asks where Luthen is, and Kleya's like, "You're not meeting with him." And then she kind of reports in and like, "Hey, we got the mission done." And Clay's like, "I already know. We've already moved the money." And they go on to have that conversation, and you start to learn kind of the power dynamics of Vel answers to her, and she kind of gives the orders. And one of the last things that they talk about in this scene, Mac, is Cassian. And he's kind of a loose end here. And Kleya, I don't know if this is coming from Luthen or just from Kleya, she pretty much says, you need to take him out. You need to find where he's at, because if he squeals, we're all in trouble. He's seen Luthen. You need to kill him.
Yeah. I get the sense that Kleya is actually kind of calling the shots in some way. Like she's got just as much agency in these kind of operations as Luthen does. Like I don't know if she consulted Luthen about this at all. I kind of think she's just going to meet Vel of her own accord to say like clean this up because she's worried about it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's also interesting that Vel has no idea what Sint is doing.
Yeah,
like Kleya mentions like she's doing what she's told, just like you should do what you're told, and I'm telling you to find Cassian Andor and kill him.
Yeah,
which is interesting. Again, like kind of cold-hearted. We're gonna get rid of this guy because he's a loose thread, and I don't know if we can trust him. And
especially after he kind of ended up being the one over Skeen that was actually true to the deal and the mission and everything, and like looking after Nemec when Vel didn't even want to and stuff. It seems cold.
Yeah, and she even says the line towards the end of this scene, "This is what revolution looks like, Vel." Like this is the stuff that you don't hear about in history books or in the plays and stuff that we tell ourselves later in the glorified version of this. But this is what it really looks like. This is the nitty gritty, and this is how we get things done. So, again, I would agree with you. It feels like she's calling the shot on this, and I don't know if Luthen actually knows, but it seems like Vel is kind of hesitant to do this. And then we get a quick scene of Cinta riding kind of her skiff down the mountain, And we get an indication of like, okay, she's going to be a character moving forward, an agent, and that's the last we see of her. And then we return to Ferrix with Andor as he returns to Marva's home, and as he enters, he wakes her up, and they kind of have a little homecoming as B2 wakes up, and Marva's really excited that he's there and he's alive. And again, this is something that we talked about before, but we kind of had, I think, an indication, especially in this rewatch, that Cassian left home a lot. And this is probably a familiar sort of thing that happened between him and Marva. Yeah. Right? Would you get that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love their relationship so much. You can tell that like Marva's got some thoughts that she has in the back of her head that she's not saying fully in this interaction, right? Cassian's like, "Oh, no, I forgot. You're tired. Like, of course, you must be tired. We'll go in the morning or whatever." Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Yeah, let's do that." Cuz like I think she knows before he does that there's going to be a parting of some kind, and that she wants this last quiet moment just to like sit down and have dinner and rest and kind of be a normal mother and son for a second,
Yeah, and it's through the course of this conversation where I think Cassian starts to realize like his actions have consequences, because she starts talking about like, hey, Premor has been kicked out and the Empire is now occupying the hotel, and there's stormtroopers here, and it's really kind of your fault. And Cassian's kind of taken aback by that, of like, what do you mean? Who turned me in? And that's where he learns that Tim with 2 M's is the guy who turned him in. And everybody knows that Cassian killed 2 corporate guards, and like it feels like everyone on Ferrix knows. They're just not ratting him out or like letting everyone know, like, we know he's still out there or alive or he's back or anything like that. It just, you get the sense like everyone's kind of mad at Cassian, and because the Empire's here and it's his fault,
and everybody has some sense of that. Yeah. I mean, like, it's kind of the story of Cassian's whole life, right? It's like this entire community that Cassian's actions are affecting in some way, or like he's taking advantage of people in some way or whatever. But everybody still, for whatever reason, kind of wants the best for him and still wants to believe in him and look out for him to some degree. So, I mean, I think it's a pretty familiar dissonance in that regard.
Yeah, and then they go on to have their conversation of like, hey, this is what, like, a big deal what you've done. And Cassian kind of shifts his conversation to Bix and like, well, how is she doing? And he goes on to say like he wants to leave Ferrix and take Marva with him and B2 to get somewhere away from the cold and damp and get somewhere warm and easy. And I think there is part of him that's trying to run away from what he's done, and
even the greater sense of the purpose that's calling to him. I think he knows that he wants to be part of the rebellion and fight for something bigger than himself at this point, but there's still part of him that's running from it.
Absolutely. And he wants to use those credits to have a better life with his mom and get away from it all. But she's, like you said, kind of just playing along here right now, but she knows that she's not leaving. Yeah. She even says so later in the episode, but like she'll play it along for now. Of like, okay, I'll just kind of say what you need to hear because I don't think you're ready to hear the truth yet. Of like, you can't run away from certain things, and Marva's not ready to run away anymore. So after that scene, we transition back to Coruscant with Mon Mothma, as there is a party going on in her home, and we get a kind of a good sense of some of the people there, which are some Imperials, and then we meet a new character named Tay Kolma, who is from Chandrila, and it is the person that Mon Mothma wants to bring in in the rebellion to kind of help with the money moving aspect of everything. Yeah. And Mac, I don't know if you got this sense, but there's definitely some tension between these two characters, right?
100%. I got like high school sweethearts kind of deal, and then parted and went their own ways into adulthood and stuff. But those memories are still kind of there. Particularly Perrin's interactions with them, like with Mon and Tay. It gets like you kind of get a sense that he's a little jealous and protective in that regard. So I definitely got the sense that they've got some history.
I do too. I think there's something there. Mon Mothma brings her daughter up, and she's totally uninterested in meeting Tay Kolma. And Tay Kolma says he's of the Bank of Kolma, which, again, that money-moving aspect, I think, is why Mon Mothma is wanting to bring him in to help with everything. And, you know, before they meet Leda and he's introduced to her, he kind of makes mention of like, I can't believe you do this, Mon. Like, he's kind of disgusted by what he is seeing, in a sense of like, this doesn't seem like it's you.
Yeah.
Right?
And he starts being like, you know, there's some people who like, we're a little edgier. We kind of have some, you know, not to toot our own horn, but we have some dangerous ideas. And Mon's like, do you want to actually be a part of that? You want to
do something about that?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of after Leda leaves, that's where their conversation goes. And she's very, very careful in terms of her wording and how she says it all, but basically reveals, hey, there's something much bigger going on than what you even realize. And I'm going to need your help on this. And that's where the conversation goes. And then that's where, you know, Perrin is kind of watching them throughout the party as they're talking and moving. And Mon Mothma mentions that, like, hey, on the outside, I'm someone who spends her days fighting and failing to protect separatist do-gooders. And everyone kind of looks at me like a joke, but there's so much more to me than what people see on the outside. That's just a facade that I've built up. And I'm doing much, much more, and I want you to be a part of that. And so it's kind of the first step of her reaching out to expand this rebellion network, and it's a risk.
Yeah.
I think this is a huge, huge gamble.
Well, and Luthen knew it, Mon knew it, that's why there was so much lead up, and they were discussing it and everything. It's a big deal. I love the way that, like, her subterfuge is described and everything by herself. We see a bunch of different kinds of people leading double lives. You've got Luthen, who appears to be completely uninvolved in anything. He's just some antiquities dealer. You know, he's got some connections with people in power, but that's about it. And then really he's Batman for the rebellion. Mon is doing a very different thing. Her disguise is just incompetence, or not even incompetence, but like inability, powerlessness.
Yes.
Like her disguise is that she's presenting herself as completely incapable of accomplishing any kind of good. But the whole time she's working under the surface, accomplishing good, you know?
Yeah, she says that she learned something actually very valuable from Palpatine. And I love this line that she says. She says, I show you the stone in my hand, you miss the knife at your throat.
Yeah.
Right? You think I'm doing this one thing, but I'm doing something so much more dangerous than what you realize. And she actually learned that from Palpatine himself. And I love that, of like, Palpatine's kind of teaching her this lesson of like, this is how you operate if you want to get things done. You can't just have like the stone in your hand and hope that accomplishes anything. Right. You got to be doing something that people don't see.
Yeah.
So I really love this conversation and the tension that it builds in terms of like, I don't know, like there's There's something so cool about the politics of the Empire.
Yeah.
I could watch a whole show on it.
There was so many people after, as a reaction to the prequels, that were like, politics doesn't belong in Star Wars. And that's the wrong takeaway. Because I think the best parts of the prequels are how you see the political maneuvering and how Palpatine gets his hands in everything and comes to power. And I think the real reaction was like, we want less scenes of people talking in rooms that seem a little like static. I think that was because that was often how that political information was delivered. This is showing that like there are amazing Star Wars stories to be told in the realm of politics and everything. It's just that the presentation matters, the setting up the stakes and the personal commitments of everyone and the personal costs it's taking. That's what differentiates it, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep politics in Star Wars. Just do political stories like this.
Yeah, it's so good. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. Then we return to Ferrix as Cassian goes to meet with Bix, and at first she doesn't respond when he goes to the scrapyard to call on her, but eventually she comes out, and once again she kind of also reiterates what Marva was saying, like, hey, everyone blames you for this, and he brings up, if it weren't for your crazy boyfriend, this wouldn't have happened. And then they kind of have this discussion, and we learn a little bit about their history of like, yeah, they did actually used to be a thing.
Yep.
And Tim was a little intimidated by that, of like they used to have a fling. And I think that's why he turned him in, is because he was worried about that. And then he goes on to question, hey, how are you connected to Luthen, right? He doesn't call him Luthen, but he wants to know how Bix is involved in all of this. And he ends up saying, if you ever talk to him again, tell him I held up my end of the deal. And basically just kind of saying like, leave me alone. I don't want anything to do with this. Don't come after me ever again. I don't want to be a part of whatever this is. So leave me alone about it. I did my part. I'm done. But I also think that he was really going there to tell Bix goodbye, right? Like, I think he still has a major thing for Bix.
That's so clear just through how this season goes, especially the first 3 episodes and everything. He definitely is trying to get that farewell in at the end of the day.
And then he leaves some money for all of his friends. And
he's like, look, I owe tons of people tons of money. Here's like
12,000 credits or whatever. And like he's taking care of his debts because he really does want to leave everything behind. He thinks that he can run away, and then he ends up leaving Bix, who just kind of sits there in silence as he walks away and returns to his home. But as he returns to his home, he passes some stormtroopers on Rix Road, and as he passes them, we get a really, really important flashback of Cassian here. And I love this flashback, Mac.
For sure. The passing stormtroopers and everything kind of, they juxtapose it with the flashback of him watching. So I'll say troopers in clone armor, walking through the streets of Ferrix. And his father Clem interacting with them and stuff. I had a question of when exactly this is.
I would say this is from anywhere a couple days after Revenge of the Sith to a year after Revenge of the Sith.
Yes, because I guess that was my big thing. We know that like Cassian did come up a separatist and everything with Marva and Clem, but I didn't know if this was them if this was the Republic coming to Ferrix, and this was a little further back than I thought, like during the Clone Wars, or if this was the very early days of the Empire when they still hadn't phased out the clone trooper armor for the stormtrooper armor.
I think it's the very early days, because you see like a commander there that looks like they're in Imperial garb a little bit.
It's tough to tell with like Clone Wars Republic Navy officers, though.
Yeah,
the uniforms look really similar. I don't know. I just had that question watching it. I felt like we were looking at the very early days of the Empire, kind of their first announcement of themselves on Ferrix, which I don't think the Republic would feel the need to do in the same way. But I had that question. I wanted to clear it up.
Yeah, and I think someone from the crowd says "for the Republic" and throws a stone at the clones. So I'm almost like thinking that the people of Ferrix were mad that they transitioned to an empire.
Yeah, of course.
yeah, well, of course, yeah. And Clem is trying to reassure his son, like, hey, don't worry, they're not going to be here long. And I kind of love that we see Cassian as older Cassian in some of these scenes where it's like he's reliving it.
Yeah.
And then when someone throws one of the stones at the clones, Clem runs out and is like, what are you doing? Stop. But then like the person who actually threw it melts into the crowd and the clones turn around. And it makes it look like Clem is the one who threw the stone.
Yeah.
Which will end up being the reason that he is hung in the streets of Rix Road. And it's one of the first, like, oh my gosh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Of like, but then, I mean, if you watch the first season of The Bad Batch, that's exactly what, is happening to people all over the galaxy. If like they're trying to establish, hey, we are the Empire now, and you're not going to mess with us.
Yeah.
No more uprisings. We're done with those. No, we're not going back to the Clone Wars. And so, yeah, we see Clem rush out, and then the clone troopers turn around on him, and then that's kind of where the flashback ends, as Cassian is still trying to make his way home. More stormtroopers are there, but then when he enters his home, he's trying to convince Marva, hey, come with me. We're leaving everything behind, but Marva says that she's staying. She's no longer going to go with him. And she basically, I think she knows more than anyone, this is the beginning of the rebellion, and I want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Her whole speech is just so moving, and it's also such an interesting perspective to hear her talking about what Cassian's actions have inspired in her without even knowing it was Cassian.
Yes.
And it's almost scary for Cassian, I think, to see that like what I did like on Aldani, I thought was just a one thing. I was gonna get the payday and be good, but like my own mother has been inspired by what we did.
Yeah.
So like I think it's almost scary to Cassian. The weight of like what is actually happening in the galaxy is kind of coming down on him here. And yeah, but I mean, I love Marva. Marva's one of the best characters in Star Wars, I think.
Yeah, she's so good. Like when she's asked about like, what are you talking about rebellion? She says it's overdue and probably doomed, and I'm too old, but I don't care anymore. Like, I love it.
She knows she doesn't have tons of time left anyway. She wants to take the time she does have and do something really meaningful with it. Regardless of the outcome, like, I think it's more important to her that she spends her life doing something she thinks is valuable rather than contributing to an outcome. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. And what go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's what rebellions are built on. Like that, like it comes to when people have more to lose by doing nothing than just doing something, you know?
And I really love this scene because as she's talking about rebellion, what's flashing in Cassian's mind is Clem hanging from Rix Road and him passing as a younger man, passing his body just hanging there in the winter time. And like, that's, I think, the fear of him. Like, he doesn't want to get involved because he knows what it leads to. He has seen the results of standing up, even though Clem didn't really even do anything wrong.
Right.
He paid the price for it. And I think that's he just keeps seeing that in his head of like, if I get involved, that's what this is going to end up like this is what's going to happen. And I love the cutting back to the interplay of that flashback within this scene itself. But then before Cassian fully leaves and he's going to leave Marva behind, Marva gives him a piece of information that I think we dismissed 2 years ago when this show came out, because we were like, surely that's not the truth. But I'm thinking that this probably is the truth. She says, and just so you know, you need to stop looking for your sister because she's dead. She is not alive. They went back and killed everybody on Kenari after that incident. And so I think she's probably telling the truth here.
Yeah, I think the first time through, I took that as like a mother knowing this is maybe the only, like the last time she'll see her son, and trying to set him on a path that is going to allow him to move forward in life and get over what he's been, searching for and thinking that he's missing. And I just kind of took it as that, and figured we'd actually find out some new information later on.
Yeah.
Having seen the whole first season, I think we can take Marva at her word here. I think there's nobody left on Kenari. I think that means Andor needs to stop looking for anything in the past, and he needs to look around him what's right now and start building for the future. You know?
Yep. It's just such a good scene. I really love that, because again, Cassian's at a crossroads and he's kind of refusing the hero's call right now. Like, he knows what he needs to do, but he doesn't want to do it yet. And so he ends up leaving Marva behind. And then we cut back to Coruscant at the ISB headquarters. And this is just a free-for-all that Partagaz sets up here, where he kind of wants Blevin and Dedra to go at it in front of everyone. And Blevin starts accusing Dedra of overreach, of like, you should not be doing what you're doing. You are trying to gain too much power for yourself. There's a reason that we have the sectors that we have that Partagaz set up. And he's just totally butt-kissing Partagaz this entire scene. And then Dedra's like, no, listen, I know what's going on here. And these artificial lines that we've drawn for ourselves, they're not operating it. So like, we're making it harder on ourselves by just saying, okay, you've got that sector, I've got this sector, when they're not operating like that. They're operating all across the galaxy, and we're not seeing the bigger picture here. And then Partagaz says, thesis, please. He wants to know what it is that Dedra sees. And I think he knows that Dedra's on to something.
Yeah.
And she goes on to say, there's a focused, organized rebel effort to acquire highly restricted Imperial military components. And I think, she is spot on of like, for a rebellion to be successful, they're going to have weapons to fight back. And I mean, we saw the other side of this in Star Wars Rebels when they went to go steal the Y-Wings.
Yep.
And so if you remember those episodes, like, all of that's in my mind of like, Dedra's totally spot on here of like, again, the rebels are not operating in these fake boundaries that we've created for ourselves. So we need to be able to operate freely, and not do this thing that we're doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love like the way I get the feeling that Partagaz sees something in Dedra and like is trying to bring her up almost as a mentor, but he's doing it in this tough love way where he wants her to have a lot of adversity and like have to work through things and stuff. And like, that's why he's kind of pitting her and Blevin against each other and all this stuff. So it's interesting to see how that works from the ISB side.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, so he's like, yeah, you're correct, but also like, I'm trying to make you feel weird and stuff. I'm gonna give you an ominous warning in the hallway as we part and stuff.
Yeah, he makes her walk with her, and then he's like, good job, but watch your back.
But watch your back. Yeah,
which is just so Empire, right? It's like, oh, ugh. And then we cut to 1 month later on the planet of Miami, or Niamos. And we get some cool music here. I love the music.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
it sounds exactly like that. And then we see a woman in bed, and the shower is running, and inside the kind of shower on the other side, Cassian is putting up his weapons and trying to like put everything away that he used on Aldhani to kind of just hide that part of himself away. And
he was like getting some money out of his stash for like pocket money, basically, out of his hidden
credits.
Trove.
Above the shower, it's that's where he's hidden it, and then we get the woman that he's with, like, hey, are you gonna go to the store to get some pizzos?
Yeah.
What do you think pizzos are? Like some sort of snack, I'm sure, but
I mean, either like a snack or some drinks, or I don't know.
Well,
it seems like they're
drink.
in a yeah.
But like, if you could compare pizzos to like a real world treat, I'm thinking it's like it's the pretzels with the pizzas inside, the pizza flavor. What are those
combos?
Called? Yeah, pizzos are combos.
Okay, maybe
in my mind,
maybe. I also got cigarettes. Like they're almost like because like they're partying. You know, you don't
sure.
Like they're partying. I almost got it was like something like that. Because, like, you know, it's a routine trip to the store. People would be needing to be going out to get some pizzos, like, regularly.
And the greeny green ones.
Yeah.
Of Revnog. Revnog is really good when it's green. Then we cut to outside where you see some people partying at the beach, some aliens, and
I would hang out here.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like a fun time.
As they're walking, though, you see some people running behind Keith Gergo, a.k.a. Cassian Andor, and I don't really know what they've done. I've forgotten if they've told us that information.
I didn't catch it this go-around. Because, like, Cassian just gets hit with, like, resisting arrest, I think.
Basically, like you've got those people running, and you've got some shore troopers chasing them, and Cassian's like wondering what's going on. And then when he gets close enough to the store, one of the shore troopers stops to question him because they think that he's one of the people running too.
Right.
And then, like, when Cassian's like, I didn't do anything, the shore trooper's like, why are you getting an attitude with me? What's the attitude for? If you didn't have an attitude, then, you know, like that whole interaction. If you didn't
have anything to hide, then why don't you want your stuff to be searched or whatever? Just
the escalation on part of the troopers. Like, the whole point he's getting in trouble is because you keep escalating it. And
this plays out in real life.
Yes, it does. And so he makes him stay right there, and then he's like, why are you sweating? He's like, it's hot here. It's just very hot outside.
Like, do you see the sun? We're by the beach. What do you mean?
And then some of the runners come just running up. I don't know why they're not like shooting at them. But then as they run away, a K2, or this one's actually a KX droid, comes stomping up with two vagrants. I don't know what you call
them.
Yeah,
like
carrying them.
Sacks of potatoes.
And then the shore trooper tells the droid, okay, hold this one. There's actually another droid that comes, and he thinks that the droid is just going to like hold him there. But what happens is like he's just choking him out against the wall here, just totally over the top violent with Keith Gergo. And Keith Gergo did not deserve this.
No, I mean, I think what it doesn't matter what the people originally running did, or like none of the actual things matter. What matters is this is the expansion of power. Because of what happened on Aldhani, the Empire's cracking down. All these shore troopers that were probably in a garrison somewhere are now getting to like quote unquote see real action or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's all these, you know, people that have been trained and like put through the Imperial propaganda machine and are excited to get to just like exercise power on somebody.
Kind of like Mosk and Cyril.
It's the exact same. Like it's the same, that same sense of like deriving your importance and worth from the authority you can wield against others, or whatever that is. So yeah, like that. I love that we're seeing this play out even on Cassian, like regardless of his connection to the events that kind of started it off.
Yeah. And then he is up in front of a bailiff who is sentencing a lot of people on Night Amos and eating pistachios. Pistachios in Star Wars. Never
Pizzos.
thought I'd see that.
Those are what pizzos are.
Those are pizzos. Those are pizzos. And the bailiff kind of mentions, like, listen, the Empire passed this new law. What was going to be a 6-month sentence is now going to be a 6-year sentence. Good day, sir. Keith Gergo. And that's how the episode ends.
Practically ends with the sound of the cell door closing shut.
I love that they're copying this information on what looks like floppy disk.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. The municipal record keeping technology is, as it would be, kind of archaic seeming.
Sorry for all the coughing, folks. This is my Jordan flu game. I feel awful. But I do want to talk a little bit before we end this episode about the crazy news that happened, I guess now 2 weeks ago, with the will she, won't she. Is Kathleen Kennedy retiring? Mm-hmm. There was a lot of rumors that she was retiring, and then a lot of rumors that she wasn't retiring. And then she did a sit down with Deadline that basically said, I am going to retire, but I'm going to do it on my own terms, and I'm picking my successor. So it's not really like you're retiring. She basically wants to see The Mandalorian and Grogu through, I think, and get the production of Sean Levy's movie started. So it's not quite as dramatic as people made it out to be in terms of like she's getting fired or canned or anything like that. That's not what it seems like. It seems like she will be picking her successor.
Right.
And who knows what that, I think it'll be another suit, like in terms of like a corporate person. I don't think Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau will be picked for that role when that happens. And
I don't want them to be. So like, I think some people have some confusion about what it is exactly that Kathleen Kennedy like does. Like she's the executive head of Lucasfilm. She runs the business.
She gets the money.
Yeah, she's making sure that like Star Wars content is coming out and that it's good enough for money to be made on it. Basically, she's in charge of getting all the people who are in the rooms making Star Wars in those rooms, all that kind of stuff. I don't want Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau to be caught up in the business of running Lucasfilm day to day. I want them making stories.
Right.
Like they're not able to direct and write and produce and stuff if they're running a massive global business,
I could see a scenario that happens with a lot like what DC is structured with right now. You've got two heads of the studio. You get the business side of it with Peter Safran.
Yeah.
But then you've got James Gunn running the creative and being kind of the Kevin Feige of it. I think there would be a scenario like that.
I think that's what people think Kathleen Kennedy is doing, but it's not. Like that's
just the Peter Safran part.
Yeah.
That's it.
And she was picked by George, handpicked by George. So like I also want her to be able to make sure that legacy gets passed down the right way and everything like that. But yeah, so I mean, this all seems
standard.
Seems pretty standard. Seems good.
But she did reveal a lot of information in that Deadline sit-down interview, and basically after The Mandalorian and Grogu, it is going to be Sean Levy's movie, which has never been formally announced, and it's not Dawn of the Jedi, and it's not the Rey New Jedi Order movie. This is something completely new, but we did learn some information about it, that it's going to take place 5 to 6 years after The Rise of Skywalker and will probably feature some sequel characters, which is really, really interesting. And that's the one that Ryan Gosling is rumored to be leading. So I'm really curious to what that even is.
I know. I mean, that's a time period I definitely want more explanation, like more exploration of. I want to just see what the galaxy is like at that time. You know, like I don't need the continuation of the Skywalker saga and everything, but I would love some solid adventures just set during that time, dealing with the struggles of the burgeoning New Republic and everything like that. I don't, or like the new Republic.
Yeah, I don't even know what it's going to be called.
What do you? So like that's we need answers on that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like what replaced Hosnian Prime when it blew
Coruscant.
Up? Like
let's go back to Coruscant.
Yeah.
Let's just stay there.
So I'm excited about the time period, and I would love a lot of those sequel characters that we love and have gotten to know to come back and get to have things to do that are not in stories with so much like pressure on them, I guess. I don't know.
And I'm curious, like I don't even know what the story could be, but I'm starting to get a sense, I think, of what's going on with this movie and then with the new Jedi Order movie with Daisy Ridley that they're trying to get running and keep changing writers on. Because she also mentioned that Simon Kinberg has been hired to do a trilogy that is going to take the franchise forward, in her words. And if you're familiar with that name, is because he was one of the main creators of Star Wars Rebels. And so here's kind of what I'm thinking, Mac. I think with this movie Sean Levy is doing, the new Jedi Order movie, I think they're kind of giving us like little nuggets and foundational elements for what's going to happen, because I think the Kinberg movie is going to be another 30 years after Rise of Skywalker. I think that's going to be episode 10, 11, 12, and like this is what they're basically going to give us, like a little information of like, okay, what happened after Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah.
How did the galaxy get in the way that it is in the Simon Kinberg movies? And I don't know if they're just going to totally abandon the Dawn of the Jedi movie.
Yeah.
But it feels that way.
I mean, all of this kind of stuff is just, we've heard like, Rian Johnson still has a trilogy that, according, it could still be in development. Who knows? I'm just very hesitant when any of these kind of things are announced. I also think it's more useful for Kathleen Kennedy to say this kind of stuff to get conversations off of her own personal career.
100%.
Than them actually being like news Lucasfilm is trying to put forth and everything.
Yeah, it's like, here's something to focus on other than me.
Exactly. And like, as Kathleen Kennedy has gotten way too much, like she's done a great job. She's like, if you like Star Wars TV, it's because of Kathleen Kennedy,
Right.
Like that's the reason Star Wars even did TV in the first place. I don't know.
And we can acknowledge not everything has been 100% slam dunk. But nothing ever will be 100% slam dunk.
No.
You know what I mean? And so I think
we've had a steady supply of Star Wars coming out our way, which like what's the last decade, that could be true. Like
right. And I think what they want to do is, before she goes out, she basically feels like she maybe needs to right the ship a little bit, and I think they think The Mandalorian and Grogu will do that.
Yeah.
And so she wants to go out on a high note, I think. And so hopefully we see some good things come out about The Mandalorian and Grogu at Star Wars Celebration. I'm curious to see if we'll learn anything else about these movies, but I kind of hope not. I kind of hope that they keep us in the mystery box until like they actually start filming, because the only two that I'm really confident in are The Mandalorian and Grogu and the Sean Levy movie at this point, because they seem really determined to get that filming this year.
Right. Yeah. Well, we will see. This has been a fantastic time talking episode 7 of Andor season 1, getting ready for Andor season 2 in April. Thank you guys so much for listening. The texture of Yaba is something I must discover. That quote is just like, put it on my tombstone.
Yeah. But what he actually means is Ezra Bridger.
Yes, of course. Check out our Patreon. We've got all kinds of bonus content on that and stuff. Patreon.com/MandalorianWatch. Leave us 5-star reviews and ratings on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. We're over on YouTube. Give that a follow if you're, you want to see our pretty faces and everything like that, as I look disheveled on this late night recording. Check us out on all the socials and everything like that. We will be back again with episode 8 of Andor next week. But until then, keep the watch.